marketing. Like a lot of different brands, a couple years ago, we pulled back, shaved a little of our Hispanic investment, and we quickly learned wrong thing to do, right? So it kind of disrupted our little path. And so we started looking at how can we begin to transform and kind of reinvigorate what we do. And that's when a really strong, cohesive relationship with both Alma and our general market agency, TMA, was born. So we're going to tell you about that today. What we've done is we've split this up into three things. So we're going to talk about the what, which is really the strategic imperative. Strategic imperative to address this marketplace with authenticity. The second is around the so what. So we want to do that. This tells you the 4 different things that we had to do to start to begin to transform how we were addressing this market. And then the third is the now what. The now what is basically, okay, now that we've kind of started to do this transformation, what's next for us? But I think what'll be more important for all of you is what are the things that we think you can take away from this back to your own brands and your own environment. We'll open it up for some questions after that, and hopefully that'll give you an opportunity to dive a little bit more into that. So I'm going to start with the what. So State Farm is the #1 auto insurer, and we've been that way for a long time. For us to continue to sustain that #1 position was going to require us to grow more with these younger consumers, the Generation Z, and all of a sudden I forgot that. How can you forget Gen Z? So I was forgetting Gen Z and Millennial. Okay, and if you look at both of those generations, excuse me, a quarter of those are Hispanics. So you just can't ignore that. Also, we were seeing an accelerating opportunity here. So the last 10 years, we've seen over 15% growth with the Hispanic population. And if you proceed out to 2026, we're seeing a growth rate annually of about 10%. That is significant, and that's predominantly these younger generations. So we saw this as an opportunity to be both offensive and defensive, which really led to kind of a strategic imperative for us. But before we tackled that, we had to look at some of the barriers. So I always think of it as that Apollo example, right? Where they have here's everything you have to work with, figure it out and go to the moon, get us down from the moon, right? So we kind of did that. We looked at all that, and there's some barriers we're not going to change, and we had to do everything to work around that. The first barrier is that the auto insurance is a very price-sensitive category. And in auto insurance, we have rate fluctuations to make sure we can always pay our claims. So you go through these rate cycles. So given that they were price sensitive and we have these rate cycles, we needed to factor that into how we talked about price. The second thing was around consumers' perceptions of State Farm as a brand. And what we were seeing, we thought we had kind of moved past this a little bit, but we were seeing that Hispanics tended to look at State Farm as more of an aspirational brand, which maybe on the surface sounds good, but it really isn't good, because what they're saying is, when I get to a point in my life when I can afford and it's kind of this luxury, I'll begin to work with State Farm. Well, that was not what we wanted to do, so we knew we had some work to do there. And then the third is, we would love to say we have a completely cohesive customer experience in Spanish and English language, and the reality is we don't have that. We don't have that today. So we had to work with where we were at and then begin to really define this vision. So the big insight for us in addressing this is to say, if this is our strategic imperative, we need to start working with our partners across the aisles, in our technology department, in our PA, everywhere, right? We needed to start working through that and make sure that we were having a cohesive approach to the strategic imperative. So with that, our vision was born. So we worked across the aisles, we came together, and we developed what we're calling the Hispanic Growth Initiative. And our vision for this is to become the insurer of choice, such that by creating an experience that Hispanic consumers are feeling valued, they're feeling included, they're seen, as well as making sure that we're imparting that they can have confidence in State Farm. That's our vision. We want to do that so that we can continue to grow with this market. So now we go into the so what. So that's the what, it's a strategic imperative. The so what is, what do we do about it? So a lot of things we needed to do here. So I want to talk about 4 major shifts that we made. And that's just in this year 1. So the first shift was moving from broad segmentation to more granular specific. The second was moving from in language, where we were saying we're doing Hispanic marketing because we have some Spanish language commercials, to in culture. The third was moving from one message to complementary messages in the marketplace that work together to help change perceptions and invite the consumer in to engage with us. And then the fourth was moving from media channel integration, where things work across the media channels. We wanted to make sure we were looking at customer experience integration. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is broad segmentation to more precision. So let me go back. Anyway, I don't know that I can go back. I won't go back. So anyway, going from broad segmentation to more precision really started us with, reflecting on where we've been with segmentation. And really what we've done, and I think a lot of brands have done this, is we were looking at Hispanic marketing really in its own silo, right? We had Hispanic media, in-language commercials, and we do that. And then over here, we had general market work. And we were just hearing, right? It's the wrong approach. So we are now moving to a different segmentation scheme where we've identified 6 different segments for the totality of where we want the growth of those younger consumers to be. We then cross-reference that with our partners at Alma with their proprietary segmentation that really talked about cultural identity. And then we further segmented that by geography. So that gives us a degree of precision and a foundation for us to do what we think is going to be the right thing to authentically engage with this market and grow with them.
Okay, so shift number 2 was really a change in our segmentation strategy. We moved from segmenting Hispanics by language to cultural identity, how they feel about being Latino. And then we cross-referenced this with State Farm's business targets. So how did we go about this segmentation? We used Alma's proprietary segmentation model, which we call CID for short. CID is based on an evolving cultural understanding. So back in the 90s and before, excuse me, we really looked at Hispanics by where they were born, how long they lived in the US, and what language they spoke. And we targeted and we segmented by those attributes. Then in the early 2000s, we added this idea of acculturation. How assimilated were Hispanics, high, medium, and low, as well as all the demographics. But now what we're really talking about is cultural identity. How closely you identify with your Latino culture vis-a-vis US culture, regardless of the language you speak, where you were born, or how long you've been in this country. So based on a culture-driven, not language-based philosophy, we have these 3 buckets. So let's just take a high-level view of each one. We start off with our preservers. These are the group that has the highest Hispanic affinity. They speak Spanish more than English, but they also speak English. And they really relate more to their Hispanic rituals and occasions and lifestyle. Then the second group we call the fusionistas. This is our largest group, 40%. They still have high Hispanic affinity, but flow more fluidly between English culture and Latino culture. These we call our 200%ers because they feel 100% Hispanic and 100% American. And then lastly, we have our American embracers, and this group has our highest American affinity. But they still, there is still a part of the audience that speaks Spanish. So again, we're targeting by how you feel with your cultural identity versus language. Back to Sue.
So those were the first 2 shifts, right? The third shift was moving from one message to complementary messages. We did extensive research, and we've been doing it for years, right? What we did is we assimilated all of that research and pulled that down to a different approach where we were looking at 29 attributes or needs that our targeted customers had, and what was really going to move the dial relative to them considering us as a brand and them quoting with us as a brand. So we started there. We did some research to say, how do we mix these needs and attributes in terms of what we need to dial in on with our messaging in a way that's going to optimize performance in both consideration and quoting. So with that, we brought that down to factors. And with those factors, we then really developed kind of a price and service understanding as well as brand, and that helped us define our communications architecture. And right now we have that for our growth side of the business, and it's pretty robust. We have a long way to go, but what that allows us to do is say, where is the customer in the funnel with their thinking? Are they not thinking of insurance, or are they thinking of insurance and want to get educated, or are they actively looking at actually quoting? And based upon that, this communications architecture is giving us that benefit of ensuring we have that relentless consistency of our messaging with the customers across all channels. So that's where we started with all of that. Then we got together with both Alma and TMA, and we developed a more cohesive campaign approach. So we talked price and service. So we have both of those happening, and we wanted to make sure that it felt that these two are coming together. That at the end of the day, what you see is that you can get affordable insurance that fits your needs and is ultimately going to give you peace of mind. So that's where these two campaigns were born. And then we looked at the continuum of our segmentation and everything Meg just shared. And we said we needed to make sure that we were having everything really looking at fusionistas and preservers, that all of that work needed to be focused in the culture that they most identify with. So that's where we fuse those business insights with the cultural insights. And then we also said, these people are not just only looking over here, they're experiencing culture everywhere. So then how did we work with what was, always this general market kind of silo? We said, let's make sure that we are infusing those Hispanic insights into that work so that when people are really experiencing their life and engaging in different media and messages, it's going to be a very consistent message. Now, what's really exciting is on the preservers and the fusionistas, we're not defining that only by language. That's both Spanish language and English language. So I'm going to let you take them through a little bit of how we did that campaign.
So now we get to watch the commercials, which is probably the fun
Always
part.
the funnest part.
At least the fun part for the agencies. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the price campaign. So as Sue said, we did a lot of digging and understanding some insights as to what's driving Latino millennials' insights into price in the insurance category. And what we found is that there's some anxiety because Latinos, they have a lot of factors weighing on their factors and family members weighing their financial decisions in terms of insurance, and that can make them feeling a little bit nervous. So with State Farm's personalized price plan, they get a plan that's meant for them, and that gives them more of a feeling of managing their insurance needs. So then on a creative end, we actually played into a Hispanic phenomenon, which is the use of superstitions. So as I'm sure many of you know, Hispanics have a lot of superstitions, especially trying to save money or avoid losing money. So now with State Farm's personal price plan, you don't need those superstitions. So let's take a look in this commercial.
¿Todo bien? Sí, es que estoy ahorrando para un auto nuevo y todos dicen que ponerse lentejas en los bolsillos trae dinero. Pero tú no eres como todo el mundo. Con el plan precio personal de State Farm puedes crear un precio accesible solo para ti. Es mucho más práctico.
Como un buen vecino, State Farm está ahí. Llama para obtener una cotización hoy.
So that was our commercial that we developed to target preservers and fusionistas. And then, as Sue mentioned, we also worked with our partners at TMA and the General Market Creative to make sure that their creative had nods to the American Embracers. So even though you'll see in their commercial, it has a different creative angle, we're still talking about the same kind of overall communication benefit with the personalized price plan. And so that overall, when Hispanics see, they'll have a cohesive campaign from our work in Spanish and English for the fusionistas and preservers, all the way through the American Embracers. So let's take a look at that spot.
Okay, Jake from State Farm, I really want that personal price plan. Mr. and Mrs. Alvarez, I save my shrimp tails.
Oh.
I have a whole collection. I keep them in jars under my bed.
You don't need to get that personal. The State Farm Personal Price Plan helps you create an affordable price just for you.
She also plays piano.
Yeah.
With my feet.
Like
like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or click to get a quote today.
Right. So that was our price campaign. And as Sue mentioned, this year we added a service component because our research also has shown that the idea of service is really important and complementary to price when you're making a decision for insurance. So with this campaign, we know that Latino millennials really look for help in making these decisions. And with State Farm, you have agents online and in person to help you every step of the way. With the creative in this campaign, we also used another Hispanic insight, which I'm sure Alberto can attest to in his earlier presentation, that Latino parents can be overprotective. But now, thanks to State Farm, their kids aren't alone. They have State Farm agents online and in person to allow a parent to finally let go, literally.
Vamos contigo por si algo le pasa a tu auto en el camino.
Mamá, para eso llamo a State Farm.
¿Y si no entiendes tu póliza?
Pues le pregunto a mi agente. Tranquilos, State Farm estará ahí las 24 horas si los necesito.
¿24 horas? Uf.
¡Ay, buen viaje!
Nos mandas fotos, hijo.
¿Ya se van?
Como un buen vecino, State Farm está ahí. Llama para obtener una cotización hoy.
So we also, I don't have the commercial to show, but we also worked with TMA to infuse those Latino American Embracers insights into this creative. And even though it's only been on air a few months, we've seen some great results. Obviously humor is such a great draw, and